I'm really fortunate to have Professor Steve Scaysbrook, one of my old friends, talk about his early start in the architectural industry, particularly the international language of drawing.
Yeah, I started off as when I left school. My father was a structural engineer, and I'd already been in to his office many times, and so I understood what it was all about, and just from watching him work. And my mother one day said, "Oh, there's a job in an architect's office in Hockley, which is about 15 minutes away from where I lived. I could walk there if I needed to, but the bus went straight past it, so that was a thing." So I went there and told the architect, who's a guy named Ken Norton, um, who I'm always grateful for. Sadly, he's passed us now, but the um, the first day in, I was introduced to another kid who had started at the same time as me. It was a small practice. There were about four technicians, me and this other guy, and I was basically told it's me or him, and you've got the summer to work it out. Well, the other guy, whose name I sadly cannot remember, was the son of the practice next door. They were engineers and they made specialist engineering stuff, milling and stuff. And he would rather be in that, but his dad thought it was a good idea to get some experience outside. But he didn't last long, and simply because I knew what to do without anybody telling me. I'd been in an office like this, so I started drawing. I was good at it, and don't forget, this is 1969, so I was on the drawing board. My dad had already bought me pens and set squares and pencils, and um, I don't know where I've still got it, but somewhere in this bag somewhere there is. Oh, here it is. I've got my clutch pencil, which I suddenly realised was the tool that we all used. It's a Staedtler clutch pencil. It's been around for God knows how long. And a scale. Well, this is a metric one, but somewhere is I've got an imperial one. There it is. Now, at that time, metric had just been introduced, so I bought the RIBA conversion scale. Imperial on one side, metric on the other. And to be honest, from day one we were told to use metric, so that's what I grew up in practice with. And I was taught how to draw. Construction detailing was going to be my life, and it has been predominantly. But there are other things that crept in, like I was taught to survey. So I was taught how to use a dumpy level, which was the best thing that could have possibly happened to me at that time. I did a series of jobs where we went out and measured the ground and then went and found. I don't think you worked in the UK, so you maybe remember the benchmarks that are around the country. So we went and found a benchmark and then traversed that back to the site, put a peg in the ground and concreted it in, and that top of that was the benchmark for us for that site. And I learned how to level. And from then onwards, I worked for Ken for about 2 years, and then another guy who I knew said they want a young, not junior in the office, but a young technician. And Ken had sent me to college, and hopefully, well, he did. He paid for me. So I left Ken and went on to this practice and stayed there with a completely different practice altogether from where I was. Ken's practice was industrial. And a lot of the buildings that we built are still up and around where we used to work. I mean, it's my parents used to live very close there, so I used to go there quite often. And they're still there, but this place they were pubs, and it was a massive change in understanding of detailing, and working with older buildings, because everything that Ken did was new. But this place was all refurb, and I learnt a lot there, drawing, how to draw in perspective, because one of the guys was an interior designer, and he taught me how to draw. And then construction was the main thing for me, just drawing and drawing and more drawing. And then I left there and went to one of the best practices that I've ever worked in, which was James A. Roberts in the Rotunda. If you've been to Birmingham, you just cannot help but understand this big circular building that goes up 22 floors in the centre of Birmingham, and I worked on the top of that. And my first job was to do the as-built drawings. You know, these are when the building's completed, you hand over to the client a complete set of drawings. And don't forget, this is still in paper. So I helped redraw the whole of the building, which is still there, and I've been back in many times. It's now accommodation. They've turned the whole building into accommodation, but it was all offices. And so I work there, and I work predominantly for a guy called Jim Salt, who, like, he was the next thing to a father, I suppose. I named my son after him, Jim. And he taught me everything about working on site, running a contract, surveying in just about any sort of building. We did hotels mostly up in the lakes, and up in Yorkshire. Old houses turned into hotels, and I loved it. Harrogate, up into the Lake District, all the way around there, doing work. And often as not, because I was single, I was just sent there for a week. I'd live in the hotel for a week, just drawing. And the hotel was normally empty, except for me and some maintenance staff. And basically, I lived in the room there and drew the hotel out completely. And that was great fun.
So would you take your drawing board with you?
Oh, in those cases, yeah. Yeah, I had I still got it. In fact, we've just emptied our loft out, and my drawing board's still up there. It was I can't think what the size is because it's imperial, but it was like a bit bigger than an A3,
So
because all the drawings
slide,
were on
wouldn't
a
it?
particular size. Sorry?
A parallel slide.
No, T-square.
T-square and
There's the other
Z-square.
thing. I'm left-handed. So my dad bought me a left-handed T-square, which is obviously it's on the right. So you push it with your right hand and drew with the left, which is otherwise I was having to do the one arm move all the time because it was a T-square for a right-hand person. But I learned to draw, and everywhere I went I took all my materials, and to be honest, it was pencil. Everything was pencil and ink, and that's all you needed. And I just kept on drawing. If I wanted long dimensions, I go and find one of the contractors and say, "You're with me for half an hour," and just hold the end of the tape while I work. And I loved it. And then I left there and went to a variety of practices. And then I went freelance. And in the UK, we've got these companies that do design and build. And they'll go to a big client, a really big client like some of the big chemical companies, and say, "Oh, you want this building, right? I'll do all the drawing work, all the site supervision, I'll build it and hand it over for this amount of money, complete, working, day one, and it will be on that date. No queries, it will be done on that date." And I worked for a company called IDC in Stratford-on-Avon, and I worked there for a couple of years doing that. And it was hard work. I mean, these guys ran you quick. It had to be done. If there was a query on site, it had to be answered. The be and end all was making sure that we got our bonuses at the end for this big thing being out on site on time. And I learned a lot about contracts and everything else with site work. I worked on site a lot. And then
the contracts have changed a lot over the years. We should talk about that later, but it'll be really interesting to hear you talk about the changing in the contracts over that time.
Yeah.
Later, Steve.
Okay,
we'll
go into that later. But I was still freelance at this time, and I just finished a big job, and I thought, time for a change. And so I was working for an agent, as we all did, because it was just easier that way. I got paid every week, absolutely always on time. And he came up to me and said, City of Birmingham are looking for a crew to go and start the new airport. So I thought, oh, that'd be good. And so I went and I worked there for 3.5 years, designing the airport as is now. I mean, it's been extended an awful lot. But I did what's called the service building and the heating system there and some of the roof detailing. And a lot of my mates were there as well because we all knew each other from various contracts. So there's a whole team. Well, once the word went out, they were looking for good quality draftsmen because that's what I was, draftsman. And I was there with all my mates, and we all had a good time, and it was brilliant. I just got married, and I got a boy. My first boy was born at that time, and so I was working hard to make sure I got enough money, and then I moved on to various other. Well, I stayed there for about 3.5 years, and then a recession came, and I couldn't get any more work. It wasn't dying up; they just weren't hiring anybody. And so I went to a company called Evo, Evo Stick, the
Yeah.
glues and stuff. I went there for a repping, and I found that I liked it. And I stayed there for about 9 months, but somehow it wasn't me for that particular company. I didn't like it. And then I got a job with the Dow Chemical Company and styrofoam, and I loved it. It was big corporate, but I loved the product. I loved the people, and I was working with a load of PhD students and qualified doctors who got their PhD, and they knew everything about plastic, but sod all about building. And all of a sudden, this young guy, and by that stage, I got my HNC. So I've done 7 years at college, and I got my HNC, and I was a member of what in those days was MCIAT, member of the Society of something or other. They've changed it over the years, but it's the same one. It's now CIAT, the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists. And I've been with it since about the early 70s. So I've been a member for as long as just about anybody in there now. I'm one of the oldest members. And I stayed with them simply because of the balancing act they did between the RIBA, CIOB, and the RICS, and it comes up time and time again. Who paid for the start of CIAT, and at that time, the RIBA were desperately trying to make their staff a bit more qualified. HNC was fine, but they wanted degrees, so they started. They paid for CIAT to get going, and I've been with it ever since. But I was working for Dow, and I was still a member, and I considered myself a technologist and always have done. And I was selling to architects, and so I went into a practice to advise them on the use of styrofoam. And because I could detail, I've done it. I wasn't just a Mars bar rep coming and saying, "Oh, this is wonderful," and walk away from it. I sat down, and when I started drawing properly, they all either said, "Oh, we know you," or "Didn't you work at wherever?" And I said, "Yeah." And it said, "Well, can you detail this?" And all of a sudden, I had a crowd around me. I was drawing, and they're all coming, "How'd you do this? How'd you do that?" And I just drew it. And then I stayed with them. I thought I'd stay for a year, and I stayed for 14 years. And I just kept on moving around. I became technical technical manager of Europe for Dow, for styrofoam. And I detailed everywhere. And I learned, one of the biggest lessons I ever learned was that I don't speak German that well. I don't speak French very well, but I speak English, and I learned the language of drawing. And I went on to sites all over the world. Literally, I'd leave on a Monday morning, and I might not come back for a couple of weeks. I get calls to go to this site, that site, and everywhere. And I ended up in some sites because you're always looked after by the Dow people. And they say, come onto this site and just sort this problem out for us. And I get there, and the guy on the other side did not speak a word of English, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. But the moment I did this, and I got my book out, and I started drawing, the bloke was suddenly walking around to my side and going, and you could understand he knew exactly what I was drawing, and he understood when I drew something that he understood the language. And it was the most valuable lesson that I ever learned, was to perfect my drawing skills in detailing. And I came out of that after 14 or 15 years.
So,
great
Steve,
experience.
this concept of the international drawing language, or the international language of drawing. So
Yeah.
you're saying that when you draw something that looks like concrete and you put the concrete hatching in, it doesn't matter what language they speak, they know that you're talking about concrete.
Bingo.
And when you draw insulation, they know you're talking about insulation.
Yeah. Timber, anything. And the fact that I could draw in clear, and I'd zoom into a detail and I'd move the page over and I'd draw it again. And when I was at Ken Norton's, when I first started, one of my first jobs as a junior was to take the big long rolls of drawing paper and cut them into 6-inch rolls. And I'd be there with a sawing it. They didn't sell detail paper, they sold. And so I made this up for the office, and I always carried one with me. Ever since 1969, I've always had. And in fact, here's my bag that I take to college. And what's in here?
Oh, butter paper.
Detail paper. I just have not ever gone anywhere without it, because it is, as you say, the universal language. And so I could draw, overlay, and the guys on the other side, they didn't need to speak English. We spoke the same language of drawing and detailing and construction. And once they realized that, all of a sudden I was getting the guys around, and he was translating the drawing, saying blah, 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 whatever in language. And I was drawing it, and he was explaining what he said. And these guys were going off, and he said signature. And I'd sign as Dow, I'd signed the piece of paper, and he was there saying, I want to keep this. And I said, no, picture, and I keep this, it's protocol. And so I wander all over the world, and if we'd have met, I was down in Australia, because the styrofoam is made in a plant, this huge, great long machine, but they were on skids, so it doesn't matter where the requirements were. We just shipped a skid to the far side of the world and started manufacturing down there. The Dow people would zoom in on it, teach the locals how to use it, and stay or whatever. And so Australia, I think we did Canberra. Canberra's the capital, isn't it?
It is.
And we did. Canberra was built on this pile of styrofoam. It still is. That we built the building on top of it, and it's wonderful stuff for doing that. We did bridges, all sorts of different things, pontoons in the Lake District to buildings like the Canberra Capital. Anyway, I left there in can't remember when I left, but I was getting fed up, and I didn't particularly want to be there much longer, so I left and went to a company called Kingspan. It wasn't Kingspan then, it was something else, but we named it Kingspan when I was there. It was an insulation company. I stayed at insulation, and I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I moved on from there to I went away to Hawaii and the islands with by then I'd been divorced, and I got a new partner, Wendy, who she's still my new partner. We've just done 27 years together, and we went off down to Hawaii in the Pacific, and I suddenly thought, when I get back, I'm going to start my own practice. I got enough contacts to do it. People are always asking me to do drawing work. And so when I got back, I sat down at my desk here in this study, because that's where I started it, and formed Construction Limited. And that's when I started. What did I start with? I started, by that stage, CAD had come out, and I'd learnt CAD. And the first one I went to was, an older guy. I can't remember his name now, but he was into Vectorworks. And it was the first, I dabbled in CAD a little bit, but not that much. And then all of a sudden, I was shoved into this practice, and they said, "Here's the book, learn it quickly." And it's very simple. He said, "It's like drawing on paper, but it's in electronic." And to be honest, that was what it was. And I learned Vectorworks from that point onwards. And as you know, it's the one program that I've stuck with. I've learned
Mm.
Autodesk products because you have to, but if anybody asks me to draw anything, I get the Vectorworks out because it's the one I understand and know and love. And that's how I met
I mean,
you.
yeah, exactly. I was going to. So it was probably Jonathan Stoppy's book was the one you had.
I can't, do
That
you know,
first.
I've just cleared out a whole load of stuff, and I've still got boxes there of books
I
that I
think I've just
picked up.
thrown mine away.
One
But
was yours. I
it,
can't remember, but to be honest,
yeah,
it
my.
was the website that because the internet was now live, and
Mm,
I can't remember what your company was named in those days, but it's
it was
is it still
Archon CAD in those
ArchiCAD?
days.
So it was
Yeah, still
ArchiCAD
is.
still? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the history. Um, I have been a technologist, a technician. I trained as a technician, and for some unknown reason, CIAT said, "Oh no, we've got to up our ante in terms of our kudos," and we became technologists. I, I I still don't agree with it, but hey ho, better minds than mine. And
Well,
I I
I'm curious about that change, though the naming change between technologist and technician,
well, we
because
changed the
in my
name
mind
about
there is a
four times.
difference.
We changed the name about four times. Each time trying to up the professional standing of ourselves. We started being all over the world, and so we got members from different corners of the world starting to join, either in England and went back to wherever they came from. And we got a lot of Australians, Hong Kong, New Zealanders, South Africans, Americans, Canadians, all coming and working in the UK when the boom was on, and then going back when the boom stopped. And we tried to change the name to suit the international flavour of who we were. And we are now CIAT, the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists. And I became a fellow. What they tried to do was um, give each they rank ourselves against the others. So CIAT against CIOB and the RICS predominantly, and the Chartered Institute of Builders and RISC, so the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and we get on very well with them, I must admit, and we just try to keep pace with what they were doing, and I'm pleased that they did it because it's been CIAT has been it's been one of those institutes that's made me what I am, I suppose. And I served as a vice president for a while on innovation and research. I've served other roles. I now mentor young students from university. So when they come to me, they say, "How much do you charge?" And I don't. I say, I just want you to join CIAT. And I tell them why, because of what they will give you over the years. And then they brought out a new grade, which was the fellow, just to keep up with other institutes who were also doing the same. So they were recognizing experience and age, I suppose. And I was invited to be one of the first to go through. It was a whole batch of us went through at the same time. And you have to write a thesis, basically, of who you are and what you are and why you should become and the state of the art and whatever. And I just wrote this tomb stuff and handed it over and thinking I'll either do it or I won't. And I got a call back saying, "Yeah, you're in. You're a fellow now." So if you see my emails, it's FCIAT, fellow of the Chartered Institute, and I'm immensely proud of that. You know, but go back a few years. I was I was sitting around in a pub with some mates, as you do, and one of them is a guy called Paul Laycock, And Paul was a lecturer at the university. He's also a member of CIAT and also a member of CIRB. And we were talking one day, and he said, "Oh, look, come and do a lecture." I'd learned how to lecture through Dow because I'd done so many presentations. It was second nature to me to talk. And so I went to the university, and it happened to be my university. Well, it wasn't then; it was the Polytechnic I went to do my HNC. I did my ONC at Chance College in Worley. And then for some unknown reason, a couple of us decided to go nearer home, and the Poly was doing HNC in exactly what we needed. And so I went there and did 3 years there to get my HNC. And when I got it, I remained in CIOB, and a guy called Graham Wiseman, who is still alive, and I met him only a year ago at a reunion. And Graham said, "There's a new institute just formed called SAT, Society for the Architectural Technologists." And so I joined that, and thinking nothing of it, but I got in and I became a member of that. And then I went through all the different grades of that going up through the years. And I quite liked it. But then Paul came up to me one day and said, "Come and do a lecture." So I went to the university, and look, I said, "Paul, you've got a degree. I haven't. I feel very uncomfortable." And he said, "You know more about construction than anybody here all put together. Believe me." And I thought, okay, I'll do it. And I quite enjoyed the lecture. I did it, and I had a lot. And Paul, I didn't get it, but Paul had a lot of feedback from the students saying, "Great lecturer. He doesn't teach the way the others do. He tells stories, and the stories mean something because it's actual buildings he's worked on." Most of the academics have been academics for all their life. They've never been on to site. And so I was one of the first that had been on site. And the word got around the other lecturers. They all said, "Come and do a 1 hour stint for me. Come and do this one. Can you do this one for me?" And all of a sudden I was there for the whole of a Friday. Friday was the third year students and the ones who needed that big push to get them through their degree. And I spend all Fridays there with the third years doing exactly that, pushing them and doing everything. And there was something in the university, I don't know why, but somebody came up and said, "We want a visiting prof." All the other departments have got lecturers from outside coming in, and they honour it by giving them professorship, albeit the lowest of the low. But, it was great. And all of a sudden they came back to me and said, "Would you apply for a visiting prof status?" And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And it didn't take long because they wanted another thesis thing, and I wrote down all that I knew and everything else. But by that stage, most of the other peers, the profs in the different departments, knew me. And so they all turned around and said, "Yeah, you're in 3 years, reapply after 3 years." And I've been doing that ever since. And I am Professor of Architectural Technology at Birmingham City University. And that's my title these days. And I'm immensely proud of it. I tried to retire about 3 years ago. They wanted me. Wendy had decided to finish work, and she said, "Why don't you finish, wind the company up?" And David, my partner, by the way, but my practice was still going. And David, who I'd known for years and years and years, David had been kicked out of his practice. They said he was too old. He had to retire. And David was doing, forget it, I want to carry on. And they said, "No, you got to leave." And he was moaning to me in a pub one day, and I said, "Come and join me. It's I've known you for years. I know what you do. Just come and help me out and do some stuff, mostly report writing and sit in the background and advise, make sure I don't upset people." And so we did that, and we were there together under construction for 8, 9, 10 years. We did. And the last big project was a Masonic hall in Warwick, and they were basically operating out of approval. They didn't know. They just got this building, bought it for nothing, and then started renovating it without realizing it was a grade 2 star listed building. And the chapel, which is where we hold the meetings, I'm a Freemason, and the building itself was grade 2 listed, and nobody had told the conservation officer what was going on, and they'd applied for a fire certificate for the bar, and quite rightly they said, "Where's your fire certificate?" And they said, "Well, we haven't got one." Said, "Well, you better get one. And by the way, we need to tell the planning officer because you're grade 2 star listed." So they told him, and he came out rushing, throwing all sorts of paperwork at them, which was they just did not understand. And I did. And I was there one night at a meeting, and they said, "Look, do you understand any of this?" And I said, "Yeah, all of it." And they told me the story, what was going on. And I said, "Okay, time for some professionalism. You do not talk to them anymore. You talk through me. I will run this. This is my practice." I gave them a contract, and I went to the conservation officer and said, "Awfully sorry, they had no idea, but here's my qualifications, here's my company, here's my work portfolio. I will do the work for it and get it back into line. And I'll make sure that you're involved in anything." And for the next 2.5 years, we did nothing else but work with a very good conservation officer and a building inspector who I knew at Warwick. Sadly, he went away on holiday and came back and died the next day. And so I had somebody else. But again, he was old school. He was brilliant at handling issues that we needed to solve. And the fact that he was sitting in the next desk to the planning officer mattered, because you know what it's like in the UK. We can either go to the building inspector through the council, or we can do the approved inspector scheme. We decided to go to the council's inspector because we knew that he sat next to the conservation officer, and that was going to be incredibly useful. And so we did that. That was our last big job. And I'm glad to say, after all the work that was done, we got a lot of the old boys who within different lodges there, all thinking they knew better. But at the end of the day, I just had to stand firm. And as David said, you either die on this one or you tell them to back off. And we told them to back off. And it was a bit upsetting because Freemasonry is a rank system, and the higher your rank, the more authority you got. And because I wasn't that level of rank, they thought they could tell me what to do. And I turned around and said, like, you either go to prison or you listen to me. And that usually sorted the problem out. And that was reality. They could shut the building down and send some of the people to prison because they contravened the law, and some serious laws. And so we shut them up and got on with our job and did what was done. But to me, it was just, by this stage, nearly 50 years experience of working in the industry. And all the drawings are on Vectorworks. And to be honest, I know you taught me a long time ago about 3D, but these drawings are all in 2D. I didn't need to do any complicated drawings. Everything was in 2D, everything.
That probably takes us to the current day, doesn't it, Stephen?
Yeah, we're about here now. I tried to retire, and the university kept on coming back and saying, just do one lecture, because all my lectures are all over what it's like at university. You go through a system, a platform to get your work, and all the lectures are all done up there. They're all electronic, and it was Moodle, and Moodle's global. So, and all my lectures are up there. So when the new year came in, they just copied the last year and folded it over, and that was this year's work. It was all done, with some minor tweaking. All my lectures kept on rolling on for years. And they said, look, all your notes are there. Come and do it for us. So, all right, I'll do it. And then the university got a system called KTP. And KTP is Knowledge Transfer Partnership. So the university sold its expertise to industry. And a lady called Natalie come up and said, Nat said, look, we got this job here. Will you come and look after it? And it was a programming problem where they were trying to make CAD sing along with the installation of equipment within this manufacturing unit. And they're using Revit. I don't like Revit. I mean, hands up, I just don't like Revit. But the programming language, Dynamo, is interesting. And so I worked with this PhD guy called Yahya Al-Said, who is unbelievably good. I mean, I had dinner with him just recently. We just keep in touch. And if you ever come to Birmingham, go to the Lebanese restaurant that's over the top of the station. Oh, just food like you, lovely. Anyway, Yaya and I worked out how to make Dynamo sing along with Revit to do all the work. Instead of having all these complicated sheets going down to the plant, everything was all online through programming. And I learned an awful lot from him about programming and how the interface should work and problems and how to solve it and everything else. I mean, he was way ahead of me, but still, like anything else, you learn from this. And then that finished, and then I said, I'm out, I'm done, I'm going to retire. Odd lecture, no problem. I kept my status at the university. To get into university, you got to have a card, and the card allows you access to the library, which is what I wanted. So for me, doing that sort of work was great. I got my access to the library, and then I basically went every now and again to do bits and pieces. And then Natalie came up and said, one of the guys, Mark, I can't remember his name, Mark somebody, he'll kill me when he sees me and hears this. But Mark, his contract was not renewed, and he was running this other KTP. And they said, look, Mark's not with us any longer. Can you continue doing this work? And I said, yeah, no problem. What is it? And he showed me. And it was, again, more programming, but this time trying to get CAD drawings onto the screen and using those drawings and showing how they worked. And it's called modular housing. So you probably know better than I do. You build a house in a factory, you ship it out and you plonk it onto a foundation. Basically, within a day, the house is occupied. And it was brilliant. I mean, very good. And so I did that. And then we've just finished that. And now I'm still at the university as a visiting prof still. But I seem to be working on getting new KTPs coming in. So I've got one now that looks as though it's going to go ahead, and I won't be the supervisor for it. They'll get somebody else to do that, but I'll be what's called a special advisor. So I'll stay with it, but look for other work for the university to hand over. And that's current day.
Are you doing any work on any books that you can talk about?
Oh, thank you for that wonderful tip. For those of you who come through college, it doesn't matter, the book is global. The book was being written in 1888 called Mitchell's Construction by Charles F. Mitchell. And it is the longest running serving construction book that's ever been. I am the last author of a series of authors since Charles's death and his brother George, who carried on right up to the early 60s and 70s. And then other architects took it over. And I think privately, between you and me and the rest of the world, I don't think they did a good job. They cut too much of out, and they didn't do enough what Charles did. He spoke to them about why a detail works and why it doesn't. And so I've rewritten the first book into 2 chapters like Charles did. He did a introduction to the industry, and then he's done a book which is, well, they call it the advanced book, but basically it's a start of real construction. So I've written the first one, which you've had a copy, which I hope you will be truthful. I know you will be. But tell me if I've crapped it up or done something wrong with it. But send it back with comments on Jonathan's little lines and stuff. And then I'm now rewriting the second one in the series, which is basically what I'm doing. And it's under Routledge. Routledge is one of the biggest book companies, technical book companies ever. They own a load of little companies, and I can't see it here. I think it's in the other shelf. I was introduced to a lady called Kathy, who's one of their subsidiary companies, and she does older books, reprints of older books. And I happened to say to her, why don't you use the 1906 version of Mitchell's Construction? And the book is in 2 parts, and they're seriously big books. I don't think it's the best one that's ever been done, but it is the one in time that says everything, because Victoria had just died in 1901, and her son, the Prince of Wales, Edward I'm going to get killed for this, but Edward something or other, I can't remember his. Yeah, but her son came on, and he was the big builder. So the Commonwealth was at its height. We were building everywhere, and all the buildings, all the Commonwealth buildings, were all done in the same style, and it was Mitchell style. So the book is really how to build a Commonwealth building that's been done all the way around the world. And my copies of it, because I've got virtually all the copies of Mitchell's. I can't find the original. So if anybody who's got an old copy of Mitchell's and it's dated 1888, please send it to me and I'll pay whatever. But the book is it as far as the construction is. So if you're working on an older building like this, go and read Mitchell's 1906, because it tells you how the damn thing was built. You know, too many architects go up to an old building and they just build on the side of it without thinking about what they're doing to an old building. The construction, the brick sizes, the stone, where did it come from, where the joists are, and everything else.
Steve, I saw an email today from a local institute of architectural designers, and they're trying to join into a timber frame building into a straw bale construction. And I must have misunderstood this, because they were talking about gluing the flashings together. I was like, oh my God. Anyway, Steve, I think we better wrap up for today. I've got some really good. I'd love to talk to you again, because I've got loads and loads of questions, and I've got to really thank you. I really appreciate your time. It's so much fun talking to you again.
I know there's a time difference between us, but first thing in the morning, last thing at night.
So thanks very much, Stephen. We'll talk to you again soon.
You will. Thanks, Jonathan.